it's a joy and a pleasure to be able to talk to you guys today. So after 2015, I got my license, and then went into private practice for the last 5 years. I've been working in Fullerton. My practice name is Hope Insight Counseling, and that is right at the corner of Harbor and Imperial for anybody who drives by. But the last 2 years, 2.5 years, I guess, have been spent working also specifically with a contract called St. Jude Hospital in Fullerton. And what I do there is I work as a psychotherapist for all their cancer patients. So I get to interact with the oncologists and all the nurse practitioners, the nurse navigators, who then refer their patients to my service. So and it's worked. So those guys, those cancer patients who are going through so much transition, don't have to pay anything, which is the awesome part. So it just adds to the ministry that we're able to do. So since the beginning of the year, my practice has probably more than doubled because of this issue that we're talking about today. The stress and the depression, the anxiety, all the changes that have come about because of the pandemic. And that's it was one of the observations that my oncology director at the hospital said, Tim, you know, your clinic is the only one that's doubled in hours since the beginning of the year. And that's largely because of the need for mental health, just because we are in such a predicament. We've I guess in the emails from you you wonderful people who are leading this, thank you, Tim, thank you, Rachel, and thank you to I don't even see her here, but yeah, okay.
Sherry.
Yeah, there's Sherry.
Okay. Oh, there you are, Sherry. Hi. But thank you for those directing emails, and some of those questions that were listed is stuff about, yes, mental health has become a top concern this year. What are the factors that affect our mental health? And what about your mental health as a church leader, as a church worker, and how is it affecting your ministry? How can we be of help during the holidays and for the rest of the year as we go into the new year for our parishioners, for our congregation members? So where I'd like to start is just identifying, yes, there is increased overwhelm, increased senses of helplessness, increased senses of social and political unrest, and increased crime and suicide rates. So I saw some of those comments also from Tim, from you in the emails, but looking at statistics, at some of the research that's been done, studies that have been done, this year is the anomaly. Over the last 15 years, those rates have been going down largely in most cities, but this year it's flip-flopped. And the reason that I can't imagine there's any other reason for that, because we are all stuck in our homes doing nothing but ruminating over what's happening in the world, and whether that be the election or the political and social unrest that have been going on simultaneously. I think the pandemic is accentuating it. It's making it worse because people don't have the normal routine of their lives. They don't have the normal distractors from these problems that we're dealing with as a society. So these are the kind of things that our congregation members are dealing with. They're the kind of things that we ourselves are struggling with. And so the factors to answer the question, and I understand that I only have half an hour to present initially, so I'm just going to go right through it. The factors that we're dealing with that affect mental health. I'll go from one end to of the spectrum to the other. Like the most personal is a chemical imbalance, where we don't really have any control over that. We don't have any indication other than what's going on inside of our own bodies to cope with that and to identify it. There's nothing going on that particularly triggers. It's just the feeling. So that chemical imbalance can go both ways. It can be caused by situations, or it can accentuate the situation that's already going on. So the learning about the symptoms of depression and symptoms of suicidality, those are some of the things that we'd love to educate you guys on. And I've got years ago I did a presentation just for a local church up here about when to refer. I was talking to a Stevens ministry group, which is lay counselors, people who are trained by the church to work in the church for the mental health of the congregation members. They're kind of support staff, and it's a wonderful ministry, but there are limitations because they're not licensed therapists. They're not, they don't go through a master's program for 2 years or anything like that. It's like a 4-week course or something like that. And so there is a definite time where they need to refer to a professional counselor. And it's because of these reasons. And the symptoms of depression look like stuff like isolation, stuff like a drastic or sudden change in mood or behavior. I guess by isolation, I mean they stop coming to youth group, they stop coming to church, and in this pandemic time, maybe they stop coming to Zoom youth group. I'm not sure how are some of the. I kind of wanted to get some people involved in these conversations. I know everybody's muted, but if you could unmute yourselves to answer this question, how are you organizing? How are you structuring your youth events these days?
We're doing a hybrid model. A lot of it's on Zoom, but we have small groups, socially distanced, and a hybrid component. But kids are exhausted from Zoom. It's much harder to create community. Everybody wants to be in person, except for the people that are terrified of being in person. And yeah, so it's super tough. If they're there in person, it's wonderful and a relief, but also some kids are scared. And if they're online, it's easy to disengage.
We're at St. Paul's in Orange. We are have been since June, weekly meeting with our high school students outside on the church parking lot for 1 hour, spaced out, all that kind of stuff.
Okay, social distance outside.
We are meeting weekly, a shorter amount of time. We meet mass, socially distant, and we've been doing that since the beginning of July. And it's pretty much for most senior hires the only connection time they get. And they had established relationships, most of them, so it feels like home when they come.
Oh, sure.
And we offered it, and the core people definitely took it up, but we're seeing other people that we hadn't seen before.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Sherry.
We are meeting in person. We don't do any Zoom meetings at all. I haven't done any of those since May because personally I hated them. And so on Sunday morning, everyone has to wear masks. If we meet for a youth group and we're meeting outside, masks are optional. If we go inside the building, we have to wear masks.
Okay.
There are certain families that are more mask prohibited. So I'm trying to be sensitive to those families. I have 2 kids that won't come at all. One, when we have Bible study with her, we just FaceTime her. So she's at home, but
okay. Yeah, it sounds like there's quite a few of you guys as, and I guess from a show of hands, how many of you do have some sort of in-person meeting? Our church does probably once a month, some form of in-person meeting with their students. And if they don't, what I guess what I'm gonna address that too. Because the in-person is that personal connection, that personal touch that we can't socially do. We can't walk up to somebody and hug them right now, which is frustrating and kind of crazy making, in my opinion. And I'm guessing that some other people feel the same way. Yeah, and for whatever reason.
Tim, just to point out, like, for example, in our advertising, when we started this back in the summer, you know, for our students to gather together, I actually put in there as a bullet point, you know, no hugging. You know, I mean, I had to kind of say that out loud or, you know, in our publicity initially. I don't take the time to be as specific now, but, you know, yeah, that's a huge reality for us, that kind of handshaking, high-fiving, whatever, just doesn't go on anymore, at least with our group at this point.
Okay. So for whatever reason, my Zoom program is doing weird things, and everybody's screen just went black, so I can't see a lot of your faces. And if I can, it's frozen. So not sure what the deal is. We have robust Wi-Fi. I know that. So continuing to just to move forward for the sake of time, I guess. What the next thing that we're dealing with in the factors that are affecting mental health is the personal situation. So this could be relational stress due to the pandemic related issues. The things that are contributing to that is like being at home so much with your family members. Right now, my wife is working downstairs in our office. All three of our children are in different bedrooms on their Zoom school meetings. And I'm in here. Like I said, we robusted our Wi-Fi, and we have that kind of everybody at home all the time kind of existence right now. And it's very different. It's very frustrating for a lot of people, because sometimes we need a break from those family relationships. Even though we love them, we don't always like them. That being said, circumstances such as unemployment or financial hardship, a lot of families are dealing with that right now because of layoffs or furloughs or stuff like that continuing. Next, we'd have a support system, which means other like extended family members or neighbors or friends that would usually hang out with. And right now, like you said, we're all social distancing. There's some people that even don't come out to church for group because of that concern, and so their support system is not nil right now. No visits with friends or church family. Another aspect is resources. So welfare, healthcare crises, insurance, about like all that stuff that if they're not employed, they don't have insurance. If the system is taxed, then those other resources for folks who are underemployed or unemployed are unavailable, and we're creating more financial hardship for people. So, and then finally, the idea of not having a purpose. So when we're stuck at home, when we're stuck outside that circle of influence that we were so used to, there's no meaning in life. And the purpose that we have means no purpose equals no motivation to keep going. And this is a lot of stuff. A lot of the places we find is the rise in suicidality, where these folks who are stuck don't see the purpose in living. So there's a wonderful book called The Man's Search for Meaning, written by Viktor Frankl. He's a Holocaust survivor, and he wrote this book as kind of the answer to hopelessness in situation of suffering. His idea was that in order to survive suffering, you have to give meaning to the suffering. And whatever meaning that is, it ends up being the reason that you're staying alive. Some of his peers in the internment camps were waiting to get released because they had to finish a book they were writing, or they had to complete an education they were pursuing, or they had to see this one love interest or this family member again, and that was their one motivation to keep going. And he said that every time somebody lost that motivation, there was a physical change in that person. You could see the difference. The guy would he went from going to his work, his basically his purpose or his duty every day in the camp, to not even exiting the bunk. He would stay on his bed, and there was one instance in the book. He said everybody carried around one cigarette. Everybody had one cigarette that they would not smoke until that last step, that last draw. And if you ever saw anybody smoking that cigarette, you knew that person had given up. You knew that person was on their way out. It's a heartbreaking story, and it's very informative as far as being able to find that purpose or motivate people to find that purpose in life. And working with cancer patients, it's much the same way. Working with people who are afraid of a pandemic, it's much the same way. You're looking at people who find no purpose in what they're doing. So the scriptural purpose from creation, I go through this all the time, because I remind people almost first session every time with my cancer patients anyway. And I do have the word Christian on my website one time, so everybody knows what they're getting. But with the cancer patients, I say, now remember, we are at a Catholic hospital, so this is what we're doing. And I'm able to many times point them back to Genesis and say, even further back before Genesis, from allusions to other scripture passages, when God created the angels, he created them with a free will. And then Lucifer and all his followers rebelled. They staged a coup. God said no. He kicked them out, and then stabilized the will of the rest of the angels. So they don't have a choice anymore. They're called angels because in Greek that means messenger. All they do is carry the word. That's what they do. And Paul says we are created a little lower than the angels. Or was that John? We're created a little lower than the angels, meaning we don't have access to the throne room right now. We can't do that same kind of staging of a coup, even if we rebel. Therefore, we can keep our free will. So God sitting out in eternity before creation, if you can imagine, the royal we, me, myself, and I, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, and he says, I am love. Like 1 John 4:8 says, God is love. And he's a loving God. He's got all this love to give, and he's I love. But what is love without an object? And if God didn't create us, he would have created another object for that love. He created us to be the object of that love. And that was his intent for creating Adam and Eve, putting them in a perfect garden, a perfect place to maintain, to walk around with him in his presence, in perfection, loving one another freely, reciprocally. And when we rebel, that is our free will. But it is when we look at that purpose of being the object of God's love, he created all of the world, all of the universe. As Psalm says, the creation cries out his praise. Creation reflects his glory. So if we are part of that creation, then our purpose in this life is to glorify God. Period. If we look at the simplicity of that, I mean, sometimes it's not so simple. But if we can go through life making that choice every day with whatever situation we're in, whatever words we're saying, if we can ask ourselves this question, does what I'm doing right now glorify God? And if the answer is yes, then you are experiencing the meaning of life. And these people who are stuck, who are forgetting or distracted from this meaning of life by whatever's going on in the world, because these are the seeds that grow up among the thorns, that grow up among the worries and cares of the world. And the word is being stolen. The word is being choked out. We have to remind them what that word is. That comes with one, we have to be in their lives. We have to be present and connected. And I would say one of the ways to do that is to make sure that you're making contact with each of your kids, each of your parents individually, personally, if that's possible. And if not, having a very close volunteer do some of that and break up. If the church is really big and you can't possibly do it all yourself, then yeah, enlist some faithful volunteers to help make those personal connections, because the personal connections is how people don't get lost. Like a little kid following their parent around in the mall back in the day when malls were open. They would hold their hand. There would be a personal connection there. Okay. And sometimes that holding seemed pretty tight, because if the kid wanted to run off, the wisdom of the parent would keep them from doing so. And that's the way we need to hold on to some of these people that we love, that we're entrusted with. Holding them tight, holding them just accountable for being in the Word, making sure that they're being reminded and reminding themselves of all the love that God has for them and the way that they are made to reflect that love. Did I hear somebody say something, Rebecca? No? I think you're the only one unmuted. Oh, nope.
Timothy, I'm going to stop you for just a quick second. Those are some great points. I'm just out of curiosity, just for anyone's sake, up to this point, does anyone want to chime in with some thoughts? I know we've got a few comments on the side notes as well, but anybody want to just jump in with the moment with a question or a comment related to just some of the great points that you're making so far? Give everyone a chance to, we'll take a pause here.
Oh, the comments. Missed the name of the book.
They got it.
Search for Meaning. Yep. Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl, Frankl, if you need it.
I was going to ask about, you kind of used the quote, I know I'm right, in regards to suffering. You had said, and I'm going to mess that up, I think I wrote it wrong. In order to give meaning to suffering, you have to survive suffering. Did I misquote that?
No, the other way around.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, the way to
survive.
The way to survive suffering or persecution is to give meaning to that suffering.
Okay.
And I was about to say I got pointed in a different direction. That's like a large majority of what I'm doing with the cancer patients is helping them to discover the meaning behind what they're going through. And while cancer is no respecter of people in general, it doesn't differentiate. I have folks who are barely surviving on their insurance, their Medi-Cal insurance or whatever, and then folks who could pay out of pocket for their infusions. but because every time they go through an infusion, that's like buying a car. That's how expensive that stuff is. And so there is no respecter of status or personhood, young and old. My oldest is in his 80s. My youngest is 28, and I've been seeing her for 2 years. She was diagnosed at 25, and it's heartbreaking. And we're not at children's, the children's hospital. The St. Jude Children's Hospital is in Kentucky, but a lot of people confuse that.
Tim, I have a question about that. In our quest to help people give meaning to their suffering, I have definitely had a struggle with some people who they are simply, it's like I'm hitting a brick wall. I'm not trying to like force happy on them or contentment on them or meaning or whatever. But sometimes when you're trying to help someone see the silver lining and all of the suffering or whatever, it's like just like reason why that is not at all going to help them. And I mean, referring out, yes, but is there any process to actually helping someone who is just banging their head against a wall of despair to actually find that meaning? I've been told, oh, we can all tell ourselves that, but we're just kidding ourselves, for trying to find the positive in something. Is there a process? What can we do to help people, help people find it, lead them?
Yes. And I mean, it's all, you're saying that it's a process, and it's a slow one sometimes. So we all know that we've been trained to walk alongside, and in many ways, that's what a counseling ministry is walking alongside. For somebody who's struggling with depression has a mind of its own. Anxiety has a mind of its own. Those mood disorders, it's like it's ego dystonic, which means that it fights against your mind. It fights against your sense of self-control. And when people are struggling with that depression or anxiety, it's a real thing. The depression actually tells them, you really should be depressed. You're comfortable in this depression. You want to stay safe, and so you're going to stay isolated, and so you're going to stay in this mood. But what we do walking alongside them is it's more like what Christ did for 3 years with his disciples. He showed them a different way. Now, those guys were walking around 24/7. I don't know. Did they go home and sleep at night? They just, pick up a rock and put their head down together all the time? I do realize there was a lot of involvement in discipling, just like there is a lot of involvement in discipling these days. That I have some clients who are depressed, and throw the word boundaries at me if you like, but I don't always answer the calls because sometimes I'm in another session, but sometimes he'll call me 15 times a day. And there is that dependent aspect of him knowing, he knows in his logical mind that depression is attacking him. He doesn't want to agree with it, but he needs the help to argue with it. He needs that support, that knowing somebody's there, somebody agrees with him. Does that make sense, Faith? That slow process of support, like all the way through that thought process of, how am I going to wrestle with all these excuses that keep coming up in my mind? Because the excuses are sometimes just there. That's the depression talking. That's the suicidality talking. There is no purpose. There is no reason to go on. And you know what? Some of that's justifiable. There's a lot of junk going on in the world right now. And if we point out there, if we keep our focus out on all the negativity and all the unrest, yes, we're gonna struggle to come up with a combat for that. But the focus needs to be that person's relationship with their Lord. There was a statistic that was thrown out yesterday. I heard it. 1 in 7 therapists now are dealing with suicidal clients. And it's no small task to deal with suicidal client, because there's all that, there's just that higher level of involvement that needs to be there. It's like you got to be available for that person whenever they have a question. And to a certain extent, it's overwhelming. And this is definitely one of those places where you refer to a psychotherapist, even if they're actively suicidal, which means they have a plan, an intent, the means to follow through with it, the will to do it. That's a call to the police for a wellness check. You know, you call the police right there. You say, okay, I'm really concerned for you right now. Can you hold on for a second? You know, and you call the police and you say, can I get a wellness check? Anybody can do that. Anybody can ask for a wellness check on somebody, because they, you know, I'm on the phone with my friend or my, you know, so and so, and this is their address. This is what they said. That is something that you as ministers should not have to deal with that by yourself. Don't feel like the whole pressure for keeping somebody alive falls on your shoulders. Because even therapists, even professional counselors, they know that they have the backup of the authorities and the family around them. There's a caveat in confidentiality where we say, you know what, if I'm going to let you know right now, if I feel you're going to be a threat to yourself or somebody else, I want to talk about it at great length, but I do want to reserve the right to let a friend or family member know so I can keep you safe, even when I'm not with you, which is most of the week. So
Yeah.
Direct contact, walking alongside, and making sure that they have wraparound. Those are some of the ways that I would respond to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, Rachel, yeah.
There's another question. How would you guide us in dealing with the middle school youth and parents who are dealing with what they believe is depression from this COVID situation, but it is so foreign, the idea of depression, that they are hesitant to talk about it or being willing to accept that they might be dealing with depression?
Education. I would say that there is a place for that in the youth group, and if that is a workshop that you do this kind of thing with the parents of all the youth group, offer that. Look some guidelines up. I can send you the PowerPoint presentation I did for DIG in January, and you can look at the idea of depression, because that's what the presentation was about. It's like how to see it, how to handle it. And a lot of that is stuff like what I said earlier, the isolation, the major change in behavior, talking about things that are they're not interested in doing these things anymore, these social things, or just mentioning things like when I'm gone, those hard things that folks sometimes just throw out there flippantly, and it sounds like they could be joking about it, they could not be,
Tim, I'm going to give us a kind of a 3-minute heads up for we're going to break down into small groups so we can discuss this. We'll have some questions for everybody. I'm going to just I'm going to ask one question. If anyone else has a larger question for you, we will come back as a large group before we wrap up here. But I wanted to ask, you had mentioned something about the police wellness check, and I've actually talked this past week with a student who has shared that she's feeling suicidal. She has a bad relationship with her mom, got kicked out of the house. And actually one of the reasons was mom got mad because she called the police for a wellness check, and the mom got
Yeah.
mad about this. Now, because it was newer to me, can you explain a little bit what that is? That might be something of benefit for all of us to understand what that is and what the, I don't know, I'll say legal ramifications or what is expected to happen at those.
Well, kind of like with first aid, people who are trained in first aid are covered by the Samaritan laws, which means that if you administer first aid to somebody, you can't get sued or held liable for stuff like broken rib during CPR, or other stuff like that might go wrong or happen if the person dies. I mean, the intent to save them was there. That was the goal. That's the safety net there. With a wellness check, the same kind of thing applies. If you call the police and you say, this person is really worrying me, I'm afraid that they're going to take their own life, I need somebody to go check on them. And if that's they show up at the door and they knock, and yes, it's invasive into the person's life, but it's a life-saving thing. So absolutely err on the side of care for the person that you're worried about. Because if they're saying anything that indicates that they want to take their own life, that can't be taken lightly. We have to take them at face value. And maybe that's something that we as youth pastors would say to the parent, you know what, I'm really proud of your student for the courage that it takes to make that kind of a call. Because nobody wants to call the police. I mean, it's an invasive thing. They're inviting another party into the home to experience our own chaos. And most people have those four walls up, and they have their chaos inside, but on the outside, a lot of them are trying to present as well put together and organized, and it doesn't fit with their reputation goal. So yeah, I can understand why parents would be upset, but I would say educate them for that. So the wellness check is this: you call the police and you ask for the wellness check. They come and check on them. They do an evaluation, which they are trained in, and then they decide whether to do a 72-hour hold, 5150 per se. If they do decide to do the 5150, they'll take them in the squad car to a mental health facility, and they will be evaluated by a psych eval team, a PET team. And the psych eval team is going to determine how long in that 72 hours do they need to be observed. If they're under the influence of drugs at that time, they'll have to wait until the person's sober in order to do that evaluation. But at the very least, they're going to check the house for weapons or tools that the person was going to use to inflict harm on themselves. And I know this because as a teenager, I was a senior in high school, and my girlfriend was on the phone, and she said, I got a gun here, I'm going to shoot myself because I hate life. And what ended up happening, I did what every good high school kid, smart high school kid would do. I called my English teacher. And the English teacher was like, Tim, it sounds like you need to call the police. And so she was educating me on all this stuff. And so I called the police, had them go over to her house. They did find a knife, but no gun. They did take her to the jail, just to separate holding for the time being until her mom came and got her. And it was adoptive situation, single mom, just a little bit emotionally stunted, that person. So as a psychologist, I'm thinking these things, but it happens. And the next day she came back to school and she thanked me. She did. She thanked me for the call because she knew that it was done out of care. And that being said, it's as scary as heck to have to do that. So
one more question. We'll break off into small groups with some questions. Laura asked one off to the side I want to get to for the whole group here. What is the best way to equip youth to respond to their friends who are struggling with mental health issues. It may not be something as serious as suicide, but they notice depression in them. You shared some of those signs and symptoms. For our own students, what advice can we give them?
For the students, I would say listening is the number one tool that we do, that we use for helping somebody to cope with depression. Because like I said, depression, number one, they feel like they're alone in their struggle. And when we're listening to them, we're connecting to them. The listening is active listening. So it's reflecting back what they're saying and not letting them know, I hear you, I understand you. Not, I've been there, I know what, I feel it, but I hear it and I understand it. There's a difference between empathy and sympathy. So giving empathy, but not assuming that we feel the same way, because that's a tall order for somebody who's stuck in depression and feels alone. They might push away when somebody says, I've been there, that kind of thing. So the second thing is make sure that student asks for help as well. So either from their own parent or from you as a youth leader, have them open that door, have them come to you and say, hey, my friend is dealing with this. I'm not going to mention any names, but what would you say I do? And that advice, the advice that you can give them is going to be respected because they respect you. That's why they're coming to you. It's going to be valued and it's going to be implemented. And maybe they'll bring that person to you so that you can be another listening ear for them. So the goal is to reconnect that person emotionally and mentally, get them out of that isolative mindset, and give them the connectivity, the resources.
I loved hearing some of the perspective from the Concordia students. And I don't remember which brilliant mind brought this up, but they had talked about going from that independence of being on campus to back into a place where more is expected of you scholastically, but you revert back to like being a kid again because you're living in your parents' house. And the challenge of, I had this freedom and now I'm reverted back, almost like your wings are being clipped. And I'm just seeing how that could actually play out in lots of different situations where we had all this responsibility and now we're back to a lot less and we're craving that more. Is there any insight or hope we can provide to people who are feeling like they've been reverted back and their wings are clipped now that COVID has hit?
Yeah. Let me clarify the question. I mean, is that for youth leaders or for families?
I think it actually could be for leaders who are used to more responsibility than a pandemic world is allowing them to have. But we were speaking specifically about the youth who loved their freedoms and now are kind of put back into a kid role.
Can't do as much, right?
And so your purpose is like shrunken, and that's a big hit to like.
I was having a conversation about this as well, Faith, and I'll add to what you said in regards to teen rebellion. If you're in mom and dad's house the whole time, how do you rebel now? And is that a thing anymore? I'll just leave it like that and we can talk.
Rebel online, and it's even a more dangerous thing. I'm seeing that their purpose has switched because they're going to be passionately in favor of the things that they're taking in, whatever that might be. But if they're in rebellion mode, as sometimes we are, I just think it switches to an online platform, which parents are already prepped and geared to not look at their kids' social media, which I don't understand why they would do that. But there's been so many cases of, like one case just recently in our church, a friend, so not a kid that's in our ministry, but a friend of a kid in our ministry, the police showed up at their door because the kid had been having an inappropriate Snapchat and TikTok relationship with who they thought was like a person that they were interested in dating, but it turned out to be a predator. And is it the FBI, whatever the governmental group was, were watching it because this person was already on their watch list. Parents had no idea. like none. They never looked at the kids' social media ever, not once.
Wow.
So that's like, the parents were like shocked and wanted all of us in the church to like tell people, like, you should tell your parents to look at it. But we have such privacy. We've been really trained as parents to like really respect our kids' privacy to the point where that's probably one of their only autonomous places developmentally, right? Because we run everything else. They delay getting their license. They are in sports or whatever they're doing so much, and we're driving them, and all of our identities wrapped up in what our kids are doing. But online, that's like their wild frontier. But then it can also be a danger in some ways for them.
I think that still has to be balanced with trust.
Yeah.
If the kid is proving to his or her parents that he or she can be trusted with that responsibility, then there's no problem. I could brag and say my kids have never gotten in trouble like that, but then they don't have social media either. So we're like, as parents. But the day will come when and we have these conversations with them about the dangers of social media. We are trying to prepare them mentally for that responsibility, and it comes when parents don't take any interest from the start. Oh, you're 13, you can have your Facebook page now, or your Instagram page now, and there you go. When that kid's mind is way too immature to have that responsibility automatically, they assume because they're 5 foot something that they're adult like, and they're not. And when parents have this rude awakening, it's no surprise. But I think the education of the parents is exactly what, like you said, exactly what we need to focus on, is helping the parents who still have, despite as much media attention as there is in the world and that influence for the kids, despite all that, especially now because there's so much together time for that family, the number one influence for that kid is still mom and dad.
Oh yeah, and wouldn't it be so cool to remind families that God's not surprised by the pandemic, and in fact might be using pieces of this time frame that's so much chaos to draw us back to him in a refining way. If parents realized their purpose and kids were really embracing their own purpose and seeing what God had for them as an 8-year-old or a 15-year-old or however old they are, it would be awesome. I mean, also this idea of like connecting, meeting together. We were talking about in our small group, this idea that a lot of the kids will meet with me or their small group leader one-on-one, but they don't see the need for like connection. But yet we are created for connection. So leveraging the importance of connecting to their faith life might be something that is really cool that comes out of this as well.
Amen.
I think
another way that
Go ahead, Sharon.
students can rebel is good students are not being good students now. And so that's a way a good student is kind of rebelling, which is like the only way. And it could just kind of be a part of the procrastination of being alone, isolated at home as a student. But I think that's another way students are rebelling.
Sherry, I hear that from my high school math teaching husband every day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something seriously that the teachers are discussing. Mm-hmm. Because, and if there's a way to partner teachers, DCEs, in our high schools, because they're experiencing this big time with their students. Mm-hmm. And the parents, it's been very difficult. And so Sherry, I hear what you're saying. I don't have an answer. I did put in the chat a resource called Spark and Stitch. It's kind of rebranding of Dr. David Walsh's research on children, youth, their brain, how they develop, the balance, what they need. It really comes from 20 years of Dr. Walsh's research, but there's some really good stuff, and we're going to partner with them as a district in January, starting in January, to bring these resources to you to help you help parents with online stuff. So you can check out their website, sparkandstitch.org. It's really good stuff.
Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, our time is wrapping up, but I just wanted, if you had a pressing question for Tim, I wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to ask it before we wrap up. Anyone else, that there's something else, that a topic, it could be something completely different than what we've been talking about, or something related to our conversations that we've had so far.
I was just going to ask really. Oh,
Go ahead, Laura. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask really quickly, Tim, would you mind if we think of a question later? Can we email it to you?
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say, and if you can't think of anything right now, my email address is tims@hopeinsightcounseling.com.
I did put it in the chat, Tim, without your permission. Okay. I mean, I knew you would say it's okay.
That's my permission.
I put it in the chat. If you scroll up, it's there.
Understood caveat.
Thank you.
So yeah, feel free to contact me anytime. Questions or concerns, call me a heretic. Not well, hope not. But
I was just thinking,
let's converse.
Just to go along with this community, like in confirmation, I was teaching about the end of the Apostles' Creed, third article about community, the Holy Catholic Church, and that idea of like what Shelley was saying about we're meant to be in relationship. And, now my nephew's in soccer and he's just practicing skills by himself. I mean, they all meet together, but I said, could you be a really good soccer player if you just practice with yourself all the time and never with a team? And the kids are like, well, no. But we seem to think that as a church, I mean, I really don't like this idea of well, this is going to be the new normal for church and we need to move forward. It's like, how do we think that being a Christian, we can just really have a strong faith by just sitting by ourselves, watching TV, watching church online or youth group online without being in community together, together? I mean, this is a good stopgap, I feel, but it's really, I think that's what hurts kids is that they're not together with each other, in person. And so,
well, and it's not just kids. We're talking about our new or newer online community, and what's the next step for them now and after post-COVID of not staying and being online, and what's their next step of engagement to be a part of the communion of saints, the Holy Catholic Church, the Holy Christian Church, our church. It's a challenge.
I hear a number of children's sermons coming on because that sports analogy is great. That my daughter's in volleyball, she's 15, and progressively they have been doing volleyball practice. One of the cool things, she made JV as a sophomore, so stoked. But she's been going to practices at the high school, but at first they were just doing conditioning, calisthenics, that kind of thing. Then they each got to have their own ball, and they could bump and set to themselves, hit it off of a wall or something. But they had to take a wipe and wipe down the ball afterwards and put it back and wash their hands and sand. I mean, the whole 9 yards. And they had to wear the mask while doing all that. Now they're progressing to the point where they got some sports sleeves. And each kid has to wear sleeves so they can bump into each other without touching the ball. And they're trying to make these accommodations. They're trying to make these changes to make the togetherness, to make the game possible. And that's what we're doing in the ministry too. We're trying to change little things here and there to adjust to what needs to happen, the safety precautions that need to be taken. But it's there's a workaround. We'll figure something out. We got to keep our creativity alive, and we got to keep our motivation up, because that relationship, I think, Shelley, we're created in God for relationship, primarily with Him and also with each other, and that's what we got to get back to.
Yeah, I agree.
I think for the sake of time in that, we'll stop at this point. But first, just thank you to Tim for your amazing insights. I mean, yeah, it's all just right now. Seriously, yeah, fantastic. And I hopefully thank you again for allowing yourself to be a resource to us through email and otherwise as the need may arise. And also thank you to all of you for really taking this time as well. All of us are here because we see it as something as critically important, maybe for ourselves personally, but certainly for those that we are serving with in ministry and working with. So hopefully this has been a blessing to you. And before we go, Rachel, just any one last minute announcement, and then we'll close in prayer.
I do. Hopefully you saw on Facebook, I don't know if I made it on Instagram now that I'm thinking about it, but we have our new DCE liaison in the Pacific Southwest District, Steve Shedler. So we're super excited. Steve accepted the position. And so Steve actually starts December 1st. So if you want to email Steve and congratulate him, or give him grief, razz him, whatever you want to do. But in all seriousness, and Laura gets to work with him every day, except when he's on sabbatical, right? Thank you, Laura, for putting that in the chat. There's Steve's email address. Steve is on sabbatical right now. Good grief, talk about something that's an awesome thing in a congregation that they do. I've been doing this for a long time and I've not gotten a sabbatical. So Bonnie Hicks, you're on the board of directors. What are you going to do about that? No, just kidding. But anyway, seriously, I really am excited that he will be joining our team at the district, and he will be working in a part-time role, but he's going to get to know each of you. He has promised that that is one of his first commitments that he's going to make, is to get to know you, all the DCEs in the district, and just find out what are the needs and how can we best serve you. So I just am excited, but I also want to thank each of you for being so committed. We had a wonderful team that selected Steve, that did all the interviewing of the candidates, amazing candidates. Sherry was one of them. Sherry, do you have anything you want to add? Put you on the spot.
I think it's an awesome choice and Steve will serve us well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep, thank you. That's it, Tim.
Okay. All right. Does anyone want to close us up in prayer?
I will.
Okay. Thank you.
God, I thank you so much for you and how wondrous you are, that you have created us, that you have created all of this, that you alone are mighty to save, that you are better than our life, Lord. You give us joy and purpose. And Lord, I pray for each faith community that's not only represented here in this cluster, but all of the faith communities that are around the world. Lord, your world is hurting, and the people that you love, that you call your beloved, they are hurting, Lord. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to be able to stand next to them, to love them, pray for them, guide and encourage them. Thank you for allowing Christian education to be at the forefront, Lord, of what our churches are doing to equip families. Lord, in the mental health world, Lord, we pray for those that are helping people who are struggling, that are standing in the gap. Thank you so much for our pastors and for all of our nurses and medical personnel. Thank you so much for moms and dads. God, I thank you for these students that are joining us, that are just so amazing and doing amazing things. Lord, I pray, God, that you would not only give us the strength to do what you would have us to do, Lord, but show up mightily, that we can see you as we continue to trudge through. I thank you, God, in advance for all of the good things you are bringing out of this season. And I ask your blessing on each of us, especially in this Thanksgiving time. Just continue to equip us and to refresh us. And thank you so much for putting Steve in this position. What an awesome choice. And I just ask you to bless him and his family. Lord, we pray for all of these things wrapped up in the love and grace of your son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.